Hello everyone and welcome to Changeling Gaming. Today I'll be teaching you how to play Pandemic. Pandemic is a cooperative level 2 play-to-learn game for 2 to 4 players that usually lasts between 30 minutes to an hour. In Pandemic, you take on the role of a team of professionals fighting against a tide of diseases, trying to prevent them from expanding around the globe and becoming the titular pandemic. To do this, you'll need to work together as a team to research and find cures for all the diseases, all while preventing them from spreading too far. This balancing act is the core of the game. Setup. For the game's setup, pull out the board and place it somewhere that everyone playing can easily reach. Next, set up the disease cubes at various places around the board. If you have small bowls or something to keep them in, great, but they aren't necessary. Also, find the outbreak tracker, infection tracker, cure markers, and research stations, and place the outbreak tracker at 0 on its track, the infection tracker at the first spot on its track, the cure markers near their slots on the bottom of the board, and the research stations next to the board. Take one research station and place it in Atlanta. Pull out the player deck and deal a number of cards to each player based on the number of people playing. 4 to each player in a 2-player game, 3 to each player in a 3-player game, and 2 to each player in a 4-player game. Next, determine how hard you want the game to be by choosing how many epidemic cards you want to appear in the deck. 4 in the deck for an easy game, 5 for a normal difficulty game, and 6 for veteran players. Go for 4 if you aren't sure, or if you haven't played a game like this before, 5 if you're feeling confident in your abilities as a team. We recommend saving 6 for after you've played a few games. Once you've determined how many epidemics you'll use, divide the remaining cards in the player deck into that many piles. So if you're playing with 5 epidemic cards, divide them into 5 piles. Shuffle 1 epidemic card into each pile, then place all the mini piles on top of each other to form the final player deck, and place it in its assigned place on the board. Now we need to generate our starting infections. Shuffle the infection deck thoroughly and draw the first 3 cards. Place 3 disease cubes of the color of the card on the cities they represent. Then draw 3 more cards, placing 2 cubes of those color diseases on those cities. Then, once more, draw 3 infection cards, placing 1 disease cube of each of those colors on those cities. Discard all of these drawn cards to the discard space on the board, and place the remaining infection cards on the infection deck slot. Now, deal out 1 roll randomly to each player. Find the pawn of the same color as your roll, and place it on Atlanta with your starting research station. If this is your first time playing, we recommend playing with the medic, scientist, researcher, and dispatcher. The goal of Pandemic is to find the cures for the 4 diseases around the world before any one of 3 different loss conditions are reached. Those loss conditions are, if the outbreak tracker hits the skull, if you are unable to place disease cubes when they spread, or when the player deck runs out of cards and you would have to draw more. How to play. In Pandemic, every player's turn consists of 3 phases: the action phase, the draw phase, and the infection phase. In the action phase, the player whose turn it is gets 4 actions that they can take. There are 8 general actions and a variety of actions specific to particular roles. The general actions are available on these player aids, which each player can have and are as follows. Move from one city to an adjacent connected city. Discard a card from your hand and move to the city on the card you discarded. Discard the card for the city you are in and move to any city on the board. Move from any one research station to another research station. Build a research station in your current city by discarding that city's card from your hand. Remove a single cube of disease from the city you are standing in. Trade the card for the city you are currently in with another player in that city. Cure a disease by discarding 5 cards of a single color while at a research station to cure that colored disease. This can be any research station, not necessarily the one in the same region being cured. Once you've cured a disease, treating that disease in a city now allows you to remove all the cubes of that color from the city, like the medic normally would. And the medic now automatically removes those color cubes when he steps foot in a city with them. If you've ever cured a disease and removed every cube of that color from the board, then that disease is eradicated. Flip the cure token over to the other side and do not place any more cubes of that color on the board. The role-specific alterations and actions are: the medic can remove all cubes of a single color from a city. The scientist can cure a disease by discarding only 4 cards. The researcher can give any of her cards to another player on her space, though she cannot take just any of their cards. The dispatcher can move any other player's pawn as if it were his own, with their permission. The dispatcher can also move any player's pawn to the location of any other player's pawn, also with their permission. The operations expert can build a research station in his current location without discarding that city's card. The operations expert can also discard any city card to fly from a research station to any city, though only once per turn. The contingency planner can use an action to reclaim an event card that has been used. More on those later, though he can only have one such event card on his roll card at a time. The quarantine specialist doesn't have a special action, but she does prevent any new infections in her current city and every city adjacent to it. In the draw phase, the player whose turn it is must draw 2 cards. If they draw an epidemic card, then they must resolve it immediately. We will return to the effects of an epidemic card after we've discussed the infection phase. Each player has a hand limit of 7 cards, which applies immediately after drawing or receiving any cards from other players. The number of cards in your hand are the cards from the player deck, including event cards but excluding the contingency planner's reclaimed event card. In the infection phase, the player whose turn it is must draw a number of cards from the top of the infection deck equal to the value determined by the infection tracker. Players then place a single cube of that disease's color on the city indicated, up to a maximum of 3. If players would ever have to place a 4th cube on a city, that city instead has an outbreak. Move the outbreak tracker up 1 from its current location. Then place a cube of the color of the disease that has broken out into every city that is adjacent to the city that has had an outbreak, following the same rules as before. If an adjacent city would receive a 4th cube of that color, it also outbreaks, causing a chain reaction. Note that cities can have up to 3 cubes of each color on their space. Each city can outbreak only once per infection card drawn, so if a city outbreaks into an adjacent city with an outbreak, you do not add a cube to the original outbreak city. Cities could outbreak multiple times in a single infection phase though, by drawing different infection cards that cause an outbreak. Play then moves on to the next player, who starts with the action phase. Now, let's talk epidemic cards. These are what make the game truly challenging. Each epidemic card consists of 3 steps, all clearly written out on the card. First, increase means you move the infection tracker up by 1 space towards the right. Second, infect means you take the card from the bottom of the infection deck and place 3 cubes of that disease's color on that city. If that city already had a cube on it from an adjacent outbreak, then put enough cubes to max the city out at 3 and go through the steps of an outbreak right now for that city. Third, intensify means you take all the cards in the discard pile, including the city you just infected, and shuffle them up, place them on top of the infection deck, meaning the cities that have previously been infected will be drawn again before any new cities are drawn. Finally, the game does give you some respite in the form of the event cards that exist in the deck. These are special cards that can be played at any time without costing an action, even in between the steps of resolving an epidemic card, and can let you move anywhere on the board for free. Place a research station anywhere. Reorder the top 6 cards of the infection deck. Ignore the infection phase for a turn, or even remove a city's infection card from the discard pile permanently. The first player is determined by who has the city with the largest population in their starting hand of cards. So go out and become the heroes we need and fight off the viruses, diseases, and infections that plague humanity and save us from falling prey to another pandemic. If you have any questions about the game, feel free to pose them in the comments below, or take a look to see if someone else has already answered it down there, and be sure to thank them if they have. If you want to learn more about what our ranking system means, check out this video here. And if you want to learn how to play more games, check out our playlist here. And remember, keep changing, keep gaming, have fun.